Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game from round 5 of this year's Chennai Grandmasters tournament featuring Sanan, Sjugirov and Gukesh. And Sjugirov has been featured on the channel quite a lot. He's a 2 times world champion. He won the under 10 world championship and under 14 world championship, and he's also a 3 times European champion. But his most notable game, however, is the one where he defeated Magnus in the 2010 Olympiad in Khanty-Mansiysk. If you haven't seen that game, do check it out. It is quite a brutal game. First link in the description below, and maybe after you check that one out, return to this one just to see what kind of a player we are dealing with. Also, there's a Meadow chilling in the background in that video, so that's also nice. But getting back to this one, Gukesh needs to do whatever he can to win this tournament. Like I said, even a shared first will qualify him for the candidates. Most likely, I mean, it's hard to say because stuff is happening on a daily basis, but he should have excellent chances, and the clear first will definitely qualify him. So let's see what happens here. Sanan has the white pieces and he opens with e4. We have e5 from Gukesh, knight f3, knight to c6 and bishop to c4. We have bishop to c5, allowing white to go for the strongest move, but Sanan goes pawn to d3. So choosing for the suboptimal line, hope it doesn't backfire later on. Knight to f6 and knight b to d2. So the Giuoco Pianissimo variation is on the board. We have castles, and pawn to d6. We have pawn to c3. Many games in the database with this exact setup. We've had it on the channel pretty much every third video. h3 and now pawn to h6. And what's interesting about this position is that Magnus Carlsen actually played it 3 times, and he played against Karyakin, he played against Wesley So, he played against MVL, and he lost all 3 games. So very weird choice from Gukesh. Obviously, he found some improvements in this line. Rook to e1, we have rook to e8, and now b4 is the most common move here, but we have knight to f1, the early voyage of the knight. Bishop to e3 is coming. You want to counter, of course, black strong bishop here. And now bishop to e6. We have bishop captures, rook captures, and now pawn to b4. And for example, in the game that I mentioned, Wesley versus Magnus played queen to d7. But here we have pawn to d5 right away and queen to c2. And now, again, it's a very well-known position. Queen to d7 has been played here. b5 has been played here. D captures and e4 has been played here. Many other moves also. But we have knight to e7 by Gukesh, and it is now, as of move 14, that we have a completely new game. And what knight to e7 does, first of all, it offers the e5 pawn. Well, you have to capture on e5, and then you just gobble up the e5 pawn. So is that pawn free, and why is Gukesh giving it up? Well, let me just quickly... the clocks weren't really relevant up until this point, but I will allow them now, just because it could be relevant. So give me just a few seconds. Yeah, there we go. So here you can see that the clock is hour and 14 minutes for Sjugirov, and an hour and 12 minutes for Gukesh. But now, upon offering this pawn, Sjugirov takes half an hour for his next move, and he decides to capture the pawn. Maybe not the best move objectively. Maybe you should develop with something like rook b1 or bishop d2, bishop d3, but he does go for it. He plays e captures on d5, and you can see now that his clock dropped to 52 minutes. And okay, obviously Gukesh has something prepared for this, as he planned the knight e7 completely new move. He plays knight f captures on d5, knight captures on e5 grabbing the pawn, and now just knight to g6. And also Gukesh spent some time here, probably even more than you'd expect from someone who prepared this line. So maybe he just didn't really prepare this, maybe he just thought of it over the board, but who knows. We have pawn to d4, now defending the knight, and knight captures. We have d captures on e5 and queen to e7. Gukesh now wants to win back the pawn, but also what he got from this is the diagonal for his dark square bishop, and you can't really oppose that bishop. Bishop to e3, the knight can just capture it. You can't play c4 because knight captures on b4. So for the moment, Gukesh controls this diagonal, and he does have pressure on e5. So here we have queen to e4, defending, and also saying if you capture on c3, I'm just going to capture on b7, and that's going to be very good for Sanan. So Gukesh plays c6, and now we have bishop to d2. So just continuing development, and while this is all perfectly fine, Sanan now has 13 minutes on the clock. We have rook to e8, Gukesh triples up on the e-file, and queen to g4. And now Gukesh plays pawn to f6. Pawn to f5 is also interesting, but pawn to f6 also works. The thing is, how do you counter pawn to f6? Is there a way to do something about this? Well, the problem is you can't really capture. If you capture, just queen captures, and now you can't really deal with all the pressure on the e-file because your f2 pawn is hanging. Let's not forget about our good friend bishop on a7. So here, pawn to c4. That's the way to do it. But now Gukesh prepared pawn to f5. So now, how do you deal with this? The queen is attacked. Queen to f3 was played. Also, you could capture on f5, but then just rook to f8, and you really have problems here. So you have to move the queen. Queen to f3 was played, and now knight captures on b4. We have queen to b3 now, putting pressure on the knight, and also if the knight moves, you will have some pressure on b7, but just a5, defending the knight, and now knight to g3, going after the f5 pawn, and now queen to h4, and this is where the fun really happens. How do you play this? It's a very tricky position where, of course, if the knight moves, knight captures on f5, then queen captures on f2 with check, and doesn't matter where you go to, you just pick up the knight, so it would be a piece blunder. Another thing, let's say you go rook 8 to d1, which is the strongest move, and it often is in many positions. You have to allow bishop captures on f2, and then after king captures, pawn to f4, and this is sort of best for white, but I mean, how do you do something like this, like king to g1, now queen captures or f captures? Just looks very weird to allow this, but it is the way to go. However, c5 was played in order to prevent bishop captures on f2, and also to create a pin here against the black king, so you don't have rook captures on e5, but it involves giving up the c5 pawn, and now bishop to e3. So okay, the rook cannot capture on e5, you also countered the bishop on this long diagonal, but now Gukesh just trades it. Bishop captures on e3, we have rook captures on e3. You can play f captures because the knight hangs, so you have to play rook captures on e3, allow pawn to f4, and now you pin the pawn. So f captures on g3 cannot happen. But now we have knight to d5, asking what do you play here with white, and the answer is you don't play something weird like queen captures on b7, which is what happened in the game. You have to play rook 8 to e1. You double up here, and only then after, let's say, queen to g5, now threatening to win the knight, you bring the knight back, and then something like b6. Okay, the pawn is defended, and black is still better, but maybe white can fight. However, after queen captures on b7, the game is completely winning for Gukesh, and I'm sure you guys have an idea why, but just in case, feel free to pause the video and win the game for Gukesh while I give you a couple of seconds, and you can see that he has 20 minutes on the clock. Sanan only has 2.5 minutes, so it's very hard to defend. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on paying attention to the previous line, as I did expose the threat. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, queen, not that obviously, queen to g5 is the move. And now the knight is hanging. What do you do? Knight to f1 was played, now rook to g6, threatening queen captures on g2 checkmate, and just no good way to deal with this. You have to advance the g-pawn, but now not captures queen to f5, going after the rook here. So rook 8 to e1, doubling up, but now as it was a double attack, just queen captures on h3. And it looks like, okay, you have the pawn, the knight, maybe the queen comes in to help, maybe you can still defend. Not really. Queen b3, adding a defender and also pinning the knight here, but just f captures on g3. We have knight captures on g3, and here you could just play h5, h4. There's no way for the pawn to move, but Gukesh shows us there's another way to play this. Rook to f8, and now look at this horror. His idea is a rook to f5, as the knight cannot move, rook to h5, the knight again cannot move, and queen to h1 checkmate, as the knight again cannot move. So how do you stop this? Rook 1 to e3 was played. He offered, not really offered, as the knight still cannot move, so he doubles up the rooks for free, also stops some rook to f3 ideas in the future, but now just rook f5, like we mentioned, and now queen to d1. He has to cover the h5 square, otherwise rook to h5 is winning, and now knight captures on e3. Gukesh just takes the material. In order to defend, Gukesh Sanan had to do something, but okay, Gukesh will of course take the free material. Rook captures on e3, and now rook back to f8. If this was, some game where you wanted to score beauty points, you'd play rook to h5, but Gukesh doesn't want to allow something like queen to f3, defends this, and now okay, you could play something like this, and you still know you're winning, but maybe you give white some unnecessary chances here. So he just goes back, rook to f8, and he says you have nothing to look for in this game. Queen to d3 was played, putting pressure on the rook, but now just queen back to e6, stopping the passed pawn, consolidating, and that's all there is. King to f1 was played, but now just rook to g4, and he was in this position on move 40 with 1 minute on the clock that Sanan Sjugirov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You're down too much material, and there's not much to look for here. You can't advance the pawn, you can't trade anything, there's nothing to capture, there's nothing to threaten. Your a4 pawn is hanging, and there's just no good way to do it. If you offer a trade, of course, you happily trade here. Captures, queen f7, you have constant pressure here. There's no try here for white. Whatever you play, you're just worse. And once black stabilizes, it's merely a matter of advancing pawns. There's no counterplay here for white. So that's why after rook to g4, he resigned, and Gukesh takes the sole lead in the tournament. He overtakes Hare Krishna, and like we said, if he wins sole first, he will be leading the FIDE circuit, and he will qualify for the candidates tournament via the FIDE circuit. Unless Anish finds a tournament to play, or Wesley, where they can overtake all of them in the FIDE circuit. It's not unimaginable, as new tournaments are appearing every day. And yeah, okay, you still have the World Rapid and Blitz Championship, which is part of the FIDE circuit, but you can't really count on becoming World Rapid or Blitz champion. I mean, it's fairly unrealistic goal, although it is possible. I mean, anyone can do it. So yeah, that's the game. Very nicely done by Gukesh, taking down 2 times world champion and 3 times European champion Sanan Sjugirov with the black pieces, no less. Incredible stuff here. I would like to thank an anonymous person, Benjamin Hoiberger, Elf on a Shelf, Gregory Novak, and Kenneth Few for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, but mostly keeping a close eye on what is happening with the candidates tournament. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.